The listing called it charming, like the word could cover up everything that was wrong with it. Historic, too. Original woodwork. Quiet neighborhood. Perfect for a fresh start. I wanted a fresh start so badly I ignored the way the photo never showed the corners of rooms. I ignored how every shot was taken with the curtains drawn like the house didn't like being looked at too closely. I ignored the price, too low for something that close to downtown, and told myself I'd just gotten lucky. My name is Leela Gentry. I'm 26. I just moved to Briar Hollow for a nursing job at St. Luke's, and I didn't know anyone in town except my hiring manager, who'd shaken my hand like I was already halfway out the door. I needed a place fast. The hospital put me in a motel for 3 nights, and by the second night, the air smelled like stale bleach and someone else's fear. When I found Harrow House, I didn't think about why it had been on the market for months. I thought about the hardwood floors, the fireplace, the deep tub in the bathroom, the fact that it looked sturdy enough to hold me together. The owner introduced himself on the porch like he'd been waiting. Caleb Harrow, late 40s maybe, clean-shaven, hair combed back with too much care. He wore a button-up shirt with the sleeves rolled, showing forearms that looked corded, like he did yard work for fun. His smile had the practiced warmth of a man who'd learned it was easier to get what he wanted if people thought they were safe around him. "Leela," he said, like he'd already tasted my name. "You're right on time." His handshake was dry. His palm didn't sweat. His grip was firm in a way that felt like a test. "Sorry," I said, glancing at the clouding sky. I got turned around. The GPS. "Briar Hollow likes to do that," he said. "Come on in." The house swallowed sound. That was the first thing I noticed, even before the smell. Not mold or dust. Something older, like dried flowers pressed between pages and forgotten. My footsteps softened on the runner. The air felt cool despite the humid late summer heat outside. The foyer opened into a parlor with tall windows and heavy drapes. Everything was arranged like a staged room. A sofa that looked rarely sat on. A bookcase full of books that looked rarely opened, framed photographs, with the faces turned just slightly away from the light. "I live out back," Caleb said, waving a hand toward the kitchen, "in the carriage house. I'm close if you need anything." "Do you rent the whole place?" I asked. "For now," he said. "It's a lot of house for one person, but I like the idea of it being lived in." He said it like he was talking about a body. The tour moved fast. He pointed out practical things: fuse box, water shutoff, the heater that kicks a little in winter. He made jokes about the stairs squeaking, so you'll always know if you have company. I laughed when he laughed, because that's what you do when you're alone in a strange house with a man holding the keys. The rule came at the end, right before he handed me the lease. No access to the attic, he said casually, like he was talking about parking. Doors old, steps are weak, liability. I glanced up at the ceiling. The attic door was in the hallway upstairs, a small square panel with a pull string. Okay, I said, no problem. And the cellar, he added, it stays locked. Old stone, damp, mice, maybe. You don't want to be down there. Got it. Caleb smiled, and for a second I thought I saw relief. Not the relief of a man avoiding lawsuits. The relief of a man protecting a secret. I signed anyway. That night in the motel, I told myself I was being paranoid because I was tired. Because new towns are always eerie when you don't know the streets. Because every fresh start comes with nerves. Then the room phone rang at 3:12 a.m. Not my cell. The motel's phone on the nightstand. I stared at it in the dark, ringing and ringing, until it stopped. A moment later, I heard the softest tapping at the window. I didn't sleep after that. I packed my things at dawn and drove to Harrow House while the sky was still gray, like the world hadn't decided what kind of day it would be. Caleb was waiting on the porch again. Welcome home, he said. I remember thinking, as I carried my boxes inside, that it didn't feel like coming home. It felt like walking into someone else's story. The first haunting was so small, I almost missed it. On my first day, I was unpacking in the upstairs bedroom, the one I'd picked because it had the best light, when I heard a woman humming. It wasn't loud. It didn't come from any one direction. It was like the sound was inside the walls, traveling through the studs like water through soil. A lullaby, wordless. Familiar in that way old songs are, where you can't place it, but your body recognizes it anyway. I froze with a stack of folded shirts in my hands. Hello, I called. The humming stopped. I stood there for a full minute, listening for footsteps, for laughter, for the normal sounds of a neighbor or a radio, or anything that would make it make sense. Nothing. I tried to shrug it off. Old houses creak, pipes sing. Wind turns chimneys into instruments. But later, when I went downstairs, the kitchen window over the sink was open. I know I hadn't opened it. I hadn't even touched it. It was one of those old windows with a stubborn latch, the kind you have to lean into. The air coming in smelled like wet earth. I closed it and checked the latch twice. That night, I took a shower and found a single long black hair stuck to the wall of the tub. My hair is blonde. I peeled it off, annoyed, and told myself it must have been from the previous tenant. Maybe it had clung to the grout. I would have believed that if the hair hadn't been threaded through the faucet, like someone had tied it there. After that, the house started giving me patterns. Not the chaotic weirdness you can write off as imagination, but deliberate acts that felt almost polite. Like someone was trying to get my attention without scaring me too fast. The humming returned each afternoon around 3:00, drifting through the upstairs hall. A different melody every time. Always a woman's voice, always soft, always stopping the moment I tried to follow it. At night, footsteps crossed the landing when I was in bed. Slow, measured, like someone in a long skirt dragging the hem. Once, half asleep, I heard the stair treads creak and thought Caleb had come in. My heart thudded in my chest until I remembered he had his own place out back. I got out of bed and cracked my bedroom door. The hallway was dark, still, but the attic pull string swung gently back and forth. I hadn't been near it. The next day at work, I told myself I was stressed. Moving does that. New jobs do that. Night shifts rewire your brain. Then my coworker Janelle asked, over stale break room coffee, "How's your new place?" "Good," I said automatically. She watched my face for a second too long. "You moved into Harrow House," she said. It wasn't a question. "Yeah," I said, and laughed like it was nothing. "It's bigger than I need, but it's cheap." Janelle's mouth tightened. "People don't stay there," she said. "What do you mean?" "They try," she said. "Then they leave in the middle of the night. Or they break their lease and lose the deposit just to get out. Or," she stopped, like she'd almost said something that tasted bad. "Or what?" Janelle shook her head. "It's just a weird house. A haunted house, I said, trying to make it a joke. Her eyes didn't laugh. Caleb Harrow's a weird man, she said instead. Don't let him in. Don't drink anything he gives you. And if you hear women crying in your walls, don't go looking. I stared at her. Have you? My cousin lived there for 3 weeks, she said. She started sleeping in her car. Why didn't she tell anyone? She tried, Janelle said. No one listens. Not in Briar Hollow. Not when it's women saying they're scared. That line landed in me like a stone. That night, I bought a cheap indoor camera from a big box store and set it up in the hallway upstairs, pointing toward the attic door. I told myself it was for peace of mind. At 3:03 a.m., my phone buzzed with a motion alert. I didn't open it right away. My thumb hovered over the notification while my stomach twisted. Then I tapped. The camera feed showed the hallway in night vision. Pale walls, dark doorways, the attic panel centered like a blind eye. Nothing moved. The motion alert had to be a glitch. Dust, a bug. I was about to close the app when the attic pull string lifted. Not swung, lifted. Slowly, steadily. As if someone unseen had wrapped fingers around it and drawn it upward. The panel didn't open. The string just rose until it was taut, pulled straight up, and held there. I sat up in bed, breath caught in my throat, staring at my phone like it was a live grenade. Then the string dropped. The camera view flickered once, and for a single frame, one blink of time, I saw a woman standing in the hall. She was translucent in the night vision, like mist shaped into bones. Her hair was long and dark, hanging over her face. She wore something that might have been a dress, but it moved strangely, like it was underwater. She wasn't facing the camera. She was looking up at the attic panel. Then she was gone. I didn't sleep. I kept the camera feed open until dawn, watching the empty hall like a fool. When the sun rose, I went upstairs and stood under the attic panel. The pull string was still. I could see faint scratches around the edges of the panel, like someone had tried to pry it open with their nails. I remembered Caleb's smile when he told me not to go up there. No access to the attic. Liability. My hands shook as I reached up and wrapped my fingers around the pull string. It felt cold, like it had been sitting in a freezer. I tugged. The panel didn't budge. I tugged harder. Still nothing. I looked for a latch, a hook, some kind of locking mechanism. My fingers found it, a small metal loop on the side, flush with the wood. I pressed. The loop didn't move. It wasn't stuck. It was sealed. And that was when I heard the first voice. Not humming this time. Words, clear as if someone spoke right behind my ear. Don't. I spun, heart hammering. The hallway was empty, but the air had dropped 10 degrees. My breath fogged faintly. "Who's there?" I whispered. Silence. Then softer, like a sigh through old fabric. "He's listening." I backed away from the attic panel so fast I nearly tripped on the runner. I went downstairs and locked every door. I checked every window. I turned on every light. Then, because my brain likes to betray me, I wondered if I'd imagined the words, until I walked into the parlor and saw the framed photographs on the mantel had all been turned face down. All of them, not fallen, placed carefully. My stomach roiled. I grabbed the closest frame and flipped it over. A woman stared back at me from behind glass. Dark hair, pale skin, a smile that looked like she'd been told to smile, like it was expected of her. The photo was old, soft edges, slightly sepia. She wore a dress with puffed sleeves, maybe from the early 2000s. Her eyes were the kind that could hold two emotions at once, joy and something like resignation. On the back of the frame, in faded marker, was a name, M-A-R-A. Under it, a date. I flipped over the next frame. Nadine, 2011. The next, ELISC, 2015. The next, Cora, 2019. My hands were slick with sweat. 4 women, 4 names, 4 dates spaced out like the house kept a schedule. I searched the rest of the parlor. Every photo had a woman. No family shots, no vacations, no children. Just women, all smiling like they were being watched. I heard Janelle's voice in my head. People don't stay there. Not when it's women saying they're scared. That evening, Caleb knocked on my front door. 3 calm taps. I froze on the couch, the TV playing but not making sense. The indoor camera app was open on my lap. The porch light cast his silhouette through the frosted glass. I didn't move. He tapped again, then again. Leela, he called, voice warm, friendly. Just checking in. Wanted to make sure you got settled. My throat went tight. I didn't answer. After a moment, I heard him chuckle softly. New house jitters, he said, like he was talking to himself. I get it. His voice dropped a fraction, the warmth thinning. Don't forget to lock up, he said. Briar Hollow gets strange at night. Then his footsteps moved away, down the porch steps, across the path. I waited until I heard the back gate latch. Only then did I exhale. I told myself I was going to call the police. I even picked up my phone. Then I imagined explaining in my most rational voice that my landlord's house had ghost women in the hallway and framed photos with names and dates, and the attic door was sealed from the inside. I imagined the polite nod, the maybe you should get some rest, the way they'd look at me like I was already halfway hysterical. And then I remembered Janelle's cousin sleeping in her car. I put the phone down. Instead, I did what nurses do when something feels wrong and no one listens. I started collecting proof. The next day, I went to the public library on my lunch break and used one of the old desktop computers that still had a CD drive no one needed anymore. I searched the names from the photos. Mara Briar Hollow, 2006, missing. At first, nothing. Then a local forum post. Then a scanned PDF of an old newspaper article behind a paywall I could access through the library. MARAWELLS 24 reported missing. Last seen NEAR Elm Street. The address listed wasn't Harrow House, but it was close. 2 blocks. I searched Nadine. A short article. NADINEKIM 29 missing after moving to new rental. Family SCEKS information. The rental address was redacted, but the photo in the article showed the same living room I sat in now. Same fireplace, same mantle. My blood went cold. Elise had a longer article, a mention of a boyfriend who didn't believe she'd just leave. a quote from police about no signs of struggle. Cora's story was barely a paragraph, buried under a headline about a council meeting. 4 women in 13 years. The phrase made me swallow bile. 4 women in 13 years. 13. Like the house liked that number. I printed the articles at work on the nurse station printer and folded them into my scrub pocket. That night, I spread them out on the kitchen table like I was building a case. I didn't notice the kitchen light flickering until the shadow moved. It slid across the wall, long and thin, like someone passing behind me. I whipped around. The kitchen was empty, but the cellar door, an old wooden door near the pantry that I'd assumed was a closet, was slightly ajar. I knew it had been shut. I'd checked it the day I moved in. Caleb had said it was locked. I stared at the crack in the door like it could bite. A smell leaked out. Damp stone and something sweet gone rotten. No, I whispered. The air behind me shifted. I felt it more than heard it, like the pressure in the room changed. Then the humming started, right beside my ear, low and urgent. Not a lullaby this time. A warning. My body moved before my brain did. I stepped away from the cellar door, back toward the table, keeping my eyes on the crack. The humming continued, insistent, like someone trying to pull me by the hand without touching. I forced myself to speak into the empty room. "Are you trying to show me something?" I asked. The humming paused. Then, very softly, like a breath through teeth, "Yes." My skin erupted in goosebumps. "What do you want me to do?" The silence stretched. Then, like a drop of water hitting a still pond, "Look." The cellar door creaked wider by itself. Not fast, not dramatic, just enough for me to see the bottom step leading down. And on that step, half in shadow, was something that hadn't been there a second ago. A key. Old brass, tarnished, with a black ribbon tied to the bow. I stared at it, my mind scrambling for explanations that didn't involve the dead. My hands shook as I reached out and took it. The brass was icy cold. The moment my fingers closed around it, the cellar door swung shut with a soft click, like it had never been open at all. I stood there holding the key like it might burn me. Then the humming returned, softer, calmer, like approval. I didn't go into the cellar that night. I'm not brave. I'm not a heroine. I'm a person who still checks behind shower curtains after watching horror movies. I put the key in a bowl on the counter and tried to act normal. At 2:00 a.m., I heard footsteps outside. Not in the hall. Outside the house, circling. Slow, deliberate crunch of gravel. I held my breath and watched through the blinds. Caleb walked the perimeter of the yard with a flashlight, sweeping the beam along the foundation, like he was checking locks, like he was checking for openings. When his light passed over the kitchen window, it paused, lingering, as if he could feel my eyes through the glass. Then he moved on. I didn't sleep. In the morning, I drove to Janelle's apartment without calling first and knocked until she answered, hair a mess, eyes wary. "You look like hell," she said. "I need you to do me a favor," I said. My voice sounded thin. "I need someone else to see something." Janelle's eyes narrowed. "What kind of something?" I swallowed. Proof of whatever's happening. She stared at me for a long moment, then stepped aside. "Okay," she said quietly. "Tell me everything." We went back to Harrow House together after her shift. Broad daylight, sun on the porch boards, birds making noise like the world was normal. Inside, the house still felt muffled, still felt like it held its breath. I showed her the framed photos and the printed articles. Janelle's face went pale as she read. "Jesus," she whispered. "They were real." "I think he killed them," I said. "I think he keeps trophies." Janelle looked at me sharply. "You need to leave." "I can't just." "Layla," she said, voice tight. "You need to leave right now." The upstairs hallway creaked. We both froze. I hadn't moved. Janelle hadn't moved. The camera app on my phone buzzed with a motion alert. I lifted it with shaking hands and showed Janelle the live feed. The attic pull string was swinging, slowly, back and forth. Then it stopped, and the pull string lifted again, tugged upward, pointing like a finger. Janelle stared at the screen, her breath catching. "That's not normal," she whispered. The hallway above us grew colder. I felt it seep down the stairs like fog. Then the humming began, filling the house, layered voices, now more than one woman, weaving together like a chorus. Janelle grabbed my arm hard enough to hurt. "It's okay," she breathed. "Okay, I believe you." The humming shifted, growing sharper, urgent. The kitchen light flickered. And then from upstairs, a single clear sentence, female, strained, like a voice using air it didn't have. "He comes tonight." Janelle's grip tightened. "What did she say?" she whispered. I swallowed. "He comes tonight." Janelle's eyes flicked toward the front door, toward the windows, toward the locks. "Then we call the cops," she said. "They won't." "I don't care," she snapped. "We call them anyway." We did. We called the non-emergency line. We explained what we could without saying ghost out loud. Missing women, framed photos, a landlord connected to a rental property where women disappeared. The officer on the phone sounded polite, bored. "We can send someone for a welfare check," he said. "But unless you have evidence of a crime." "I have evidence," Janelle said, voice steady. "I have documents. I have names. I have dates. I have reason to believe a man is returning to the property tonight to harm the tenant." A pause, papers shuffling. "Someone will come by," the officer said finally. After we hung up, Janelle paced the kitchen like a caged animal. "You have somewhere to go?" she asked. "I have a motel," I said. "Go," she said. "Pack a bag and go. I'll stay until the police arrive." "No," I said immediately. "I'm not leaving you here." Janelle looked at me like I was stupid. "I'm not the one on his lease." The house creaked again. The humming rose, then dipped like a breath. And the voice, closer this time, clearer, said, "Stay." Janelle went still. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. I nodded, throat tight. Janelle swallowed hard. "What do you mean, stay?" The air shifted. Cold swept across the kitchen tiles. Then one word, heavy as a verdict. "A witness." My skin prickled. My heart hammered. Janelle looked at me. I looked at her. We both understood. in the way you understand when you're standing at the edge of something you can't unsee. The women in this house weren't trying to scare me out. They were trying to keep me alive long enough to make someone else see, to make it real. Because if it stayed in the dark, it would keep happening. We waited. We locked the doors. We drew the curtains. We kept the lights on. Janelle sat at the kitchen table with her phone in her hand, ready to record, ready to call again. I sat across from her with my own phone and the brass key in my pocket, cold against my thigh like a reminder. At 6:40 p.m., a patrol car rolled up. Officer Ruiz, according to his badge. Mid-30s, tired eyes, the posture of someone who'd seen too many domestic disputes and not enough real justice. He listened, brows knitting as Janelle laid out the documents and the photos. "This is a lot," he said. "I know how it sounds," Janelle said. Ruiz looked around the room, taking in the perfect staging, the neatness that felt like a mask. "Where is the landlord now?" he asked. "He lives out back," I said, voice small. "Carriage house." Ruiz nodded once. "I'm going to talk to him," he said. My stomach dropped. "Don't go alone." Ruiz gave a thin smile. "Ma'am, I've handled worse than a weird landlord." The humming started. Low, subtle. Ruiz paused, head tilting. "Do you have music playing?" "No," Janelle said. The humming swelled, more voices joining, filling the walls like water filling cracks. Ruiz's smile faded. "What the hell?" he murmured. Then the front porch boards creaked. 3 taps on the door. Caleb's voice came through the wood, warm and calm. "Leela, I'm sorry to bother you. I need to check something in the kitchen. There's been an issue with the pipes." Janelle's eyes widened. Ruiz's hand went to his belt. I didn't move. I couldn't breathe. "Open up," Caleb said gently. "It'll just take a minute." Ruiz stepped toward the door. "Sir, this is police. Step back from the door." A silence. Then Caleb laughed, soft and surprised. "Police? What on earth?" Ruiz unlocked the chain just enough to crack the door. His body angled between the opening and us. "Mr. Harrow," Ruiz said, "we need to ask you a few questions." Caleb's face appeared in the crack, half lit by porch light. His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Officer," he said, "is there a problem?" Ruiz looked at him, then glanced back at us, then at the documents on the table. "We've received concerns," Ruiz said, "about tenants, missing persons. We'd like to." Caleb's eyes cut to me through the crack, and the warmth dropped out of his expression like a curtain falling. He wasn't surprised. He was annoyed. "You've been snooping," he said softly to me. Ruiz stiffened. "Sir, watch your tone." Caleb's gaze stayed on me. "It's always the same," he murmured. "Give someone a beautiful home and they start digging." The humming sharpened, turning from sound into pressure. The kitchen lights flickered once, twice. Ruiz looked over his shoulder. "Ma'am, is your electrical stable?" Janelle shook her head, eyes fixed on Caleb. Caleb's mouth twitched as if he could feel something in the air. His nostrils flared. He leaned closer to the crack in the door, voice dropping low. "You think you're safe because you brought a uniform," he whispered. "You think they care." The cold hit like a wave. The air in the foyer turned brittle. Ruiz's eyes widened. He stepped back, instinctive. And then the voice came again. Not one voice. All of them. A chorus of women speaking in perfect unison. So loud the window glass buzzed. Now, the attic pull string upstairs snapped taut, yanked hard. The sealed panel shuddered. The cellar door in the kitchen banged once, like something kicked it from below. Caleb's face changed. The careful mask slipped. Fear flashed through him, real fear, animal, immediate. He recoiled from the door like it had burned him. Ruiz threw it open. Caleb stumbled backward onto the porch, eyes darting wildly toward the yard, toward the dark path leading to the carriage house. Then he ran. Ruiz bolted after him without thinking. "Officer," Janelle shouted. "Don't." But he was gone, sprinting down the steps. I grabbed my phone and ran to the window, pulling the curtain aside just enough to see. Ruiz chased Caleb across the yard. Caleb moved fast, too fast, like panic gave him extra speed. He cut toward the carriage house door and stopped dead because the path in front of him was full, not with bodies, not with solid forms, with women. 4 of them at first glance, then more behind, shapes layered like smoke. Their hair hung in long dark curtains. Their faces were pale blurs, but their eyes, God, their eyes were clear, fixed, furious. Caleb staggered backward, tripping over the garden edge. Ruiz slowed, confusion twisting his face. He raised his flashlight, beam slicing through the yard. The light didn't touch them. It passed through them like they weren't there. But Caleb saw them. He saw them so clearly his mouth opened in a soundless scream. He turned and ran back toward the house, toward me, toward the door. I backed away from the window, heart slamming. The porch boards creaked under his weight. He pounded on the door. "Leela," he shouted, voice cracking. "Open the door. Open the..." The humming filled the whole house, vibrating through the floorboards. The lights flared bright, then dim. Janelle grabbed my arm. "Don't you dare," she hissed. Ruiz shouted something outside. "Stop. Get down." But Caleb wasn't listening. He reached into his pocket. "Keys." He jammed one into the lock, hands shaking. The deadbolt turned, not because he found the right key, because the house unlocked itself. The door swung inward. Caleb stumbled into the foyer like the house had opened its mouth to swallow him. His eyes were wild. He turned, slamming the door behind him, locking out Ruiz with a twist of his wrist. Ruiz's voice muffled through the wood. "Open the door, now." Caleb backed into the foyer, chest heaving. He looked at us like we were the trap. "You shouldn't have invited them," he rasped. "We didn't," I said, voice shaking. "You did." His face contorted. Something ugly and childish beneath the polished surface. "They loved it here," he hissed, like that was the worst insult. "They had everything. They just couldn't stop wanting more." The air went frigid. Footsteps sounded on the stairs. Not my steps. Not Janelle's. Many footsteps, soft, bare. Caleb's eyes snapped upward. A shape moved at the top of the stairs. Then another. Then another, women lining the landing, their dresses drifting like water. Caleb's lips pulled back from his teeth. "No," he whispered. The women began to descend. Caleb turned toward the kitchen, toward the cellar door. His eyes flicked to me, to my pocket, as if he remembered something. The key, the brass key. He lunged at me. Janelle screamed and shoved me back. Caleb grabbed my arm, nails digging in. "You have it," he snarled. "Give it to me." I struggled, panic blinding me. Janelle clawed at his sleeve. Caleb shoved her hard. She hit the wall with a thud and slid down, stunned. The women on the stairs didn't hurry. They didn't need to. Caleb yanked me toward the kitchen. His grip was iron. The cellar door loomed, old wood and iron hinges. He fumbled at the lock. "Give it," he shouted, spittle flying. My fingers, shaking, plunged into my pocket and pulled out the brass key. For a split second, I held it up between us, my breath fogging in the cold. Caleb's eyes fixed on it like it was salvation. Then the voice, Mara's, I think, the one I'd seen on the camera, whispered into my ear. "Not for him." My hand moved on its own. I shoved the key into the lock. I turned. The cellar door swung open. Cold air poured out, thick and wet, smelling like stone and old perfume, and something coppery underneath. Caleb's face twisted with triumph. He shoved me aside and took a step toward the open darkness. Then he stopped, because the stairs down weren't empty. Someone stood there. A woman in a dress I'd seen only in photographs. Dark hair, pale skin. Her throat was bruised purple, fingers marks blooming like flowers. Her eyes were clear and furious. "Marva." She raised a hand and pointed down. Caleb's bravado broke. He stumbled back, shaking his head. "No," he breathed. "No, no, no." Behind him, the other women reached the bottom of the stairs. They filled the kitchen doorway like a tide. Ruiz pounded on the front door, shouting. But it sounded far away now, muffled by the house's breath. Caleb turned, trapped between the cellar and the dead. His eyes flicked to me, pleading now, suddenly human. "Help me," he whispered. I stared at him, remembering his smile, his handshake, his careful rules. No attic, no cellar. Liability. I thought about 4 names, 4 dates. I thought about women who came here for fresh starts and never left. My voice came out flat. No, the women moved, not like ghosts floating, like people crossing a room with purpose. Their hands reached for Caleb, fingers pale and endless. He screamed then, a raw sound that ripped through the house. He swung at them, fists passing through mist, but they held him anyway, hands sinking into him like smoke gripping flesh. Caleb's feet scraped the tile as he fought, heels leaving white marks. The cellar door yawned open behind him, darkness deeper than a basement should be. The air from it felt wrong, like it wasn't just cold, but hungry. Mara stepped back onto the first cellar stair, never breaking eye contact. Caleb's body jerked, as if something had hooked into him. He was dragged backward, inch by inch, toward the open door. He clawed at the counter, knocking papers and the bowl of keys to the floor. Metal clattered, loud and useless. He screamed again, voice cracking into sobs. Please. The women didn't speak. They didn't need to. They pulled him down. The moment his heels crossed the threshold, the darkness shifted. It wasn't empty. It moved like water disturbed. Caleb's scream cut off abruptly, like someone had shut a door inside his throat. Then from below, far below, impossibly far for a cellar, came a sound like a choir singing backwards. A deep, grinding noise, like stone scraping stone. The cellar door slammed shut on its own, rattling the dishes in the cabinets. The lock clicked. The brass key in my hand turned icy, then warm, then so hot I dropped it. It hit the tile and lay still. The humming stopped. The house exhaled. For a moment, there was only the sound of Ruiz pounding on the front door, muffled but urgent. Janelle groaned from the floor, pushing herself up, eyes wide with shock. I stood frozen, staring at the cellar door like it might open again. Then a soft sound came from behind me. Footsteps. I turned slowly. The women stood in the kitchen doorway, their faces clearer now, less blurred. Not peaceful, not smiling, just finished. Mara stepped forward. Her bruised throat was less vivid now, fading like ink in water. Her eyes met mine, and for the first time since I'd moved in, her voice sounded like a person's voice, not a warning through walls. Thank you," she said. Then she lifted her hand and pointed upstairs, toward the mantel in the parlor. I followed her gesture without thinking. The framed photos, the faces, the names: Mara, Nadine, Elise, Cora. Mara's gaze held mine like a command. "Tell them," she said. And then, like fog touched by sun, she and the others began to fade, not vanishing abruptly, dissolving slowly into the air, leaving behind only cold and the faintest trace of perfume. The front door shook under Ruiz's pounding. Janelle lurched to it and fumbled with the lock, hands trembling. She threw it open. Ruiz stumbled inside, breathing hard, eyes scanning the foyer and kitchen. "Where is he?" he demanded. "Where's Harrow?" Janelle's voice shook. She looked at me like she couldn't form the words. Ruiz followed her gaze to the cellar door. He stepped closer, flashlight beam sweeping over old wood. "What the hell happened?" he said. I swallowed. My throat felt raw. My mouth tasted like pennies. "The women," I said. Ruiz stared at me. Janelle made a sound halfway between a laugh and a sob. "She's not crazy," she blurted. "I saw it. I saw." Ruiz held up a hand, face tight. "Okay," he said slowly. "Okay, everyone calm down. Just tell me what you can tell me." So we did. As much as we could without sounding insane. Missing women, photos, articles, Caleb's panic when the police showed, his attempt to lock himself inside, the struggle. Ruiz tried the cellar door. It didn't open. He called for backup. They arrived with bolt cutters and crowbars, and a skeptical expression that curdled into something else when they saw the framed photos and the printed articles and the scratch marks around the cellar lock. They pried the door open at midnight. The cellar stairs led down into darkness and damp stone, just like Caleb said. No fire, no demons, no yawning pit into hell, just a basement. But there were things down there. A room behind a false wall. A space too clean, too prepared. A drain in the floor. Plastic sheeting folded like it had been used, then carefully put away. And a box. Inside were belongings, jewelry, driver's licenses, a hospital badge from 2015 with the name Elise Martin, a lock of hair tied with black ribbon, Caleb Harrow's life preserved like specimens. Ruiz stood in that room and said nothing for a long time. Then he looked at me, his eyes older than they'd been an hour ago. "We're going to need statements," he said. I nodded, numb. They never found Caleb. Not in the cellar, not in the carriage house, not in the woods behind the property. His car was still in the driveway. His wallet was on his kitchen counter. His phone was on his nightstand. It was like he'd evaporated. The official report said suspected flight. Warrants were issued. Alerts went out. But Briar Hollow didn't talk about him like a fugitive. They talked about him like a ghost. Janelle moved that week. She didn't even finish her lease. She slept at her sister's until she found a new place. I tried to move too. I really did. But every time I packed a box, something small stopped me. A humming lullaby in the hallway. A cold breeze that brushed my cheek like a hand. A framed photograph turned gently face down, like a reminder. Tell them. So I stayed long enough to testify. Long enough to hand over copies of every article, every note, every detail of what I'd seen and heard. The town finally listened, but not because I was believable, because the basement was, because the trophies were, because the missing women had names and proof now, not just rumors. Harrow House didn't get listed again. It got boarded up. The windows were covered with plywood. The front door was chained. A sign went up, condemned. For a while, that felt like closure. Then, 3 months later, I drove past on my way home from a double shift. It was late. The street was empty. The plywood on the parlor window was gone. Not pried off, removed cleanly. And inside, behind the glass, someone had relit the fireplace. I slowed, heart thudding. The flames danced softly in the dark room. On the mantel, I could see the framed photographs again, standing upright in a neat line. 4 women, 4 faces, and between them, a 5th frame I didn't recognize. A woman with blonde hair. My smile too stiff. my eyes looking slightly away from the camera. On the back of my neck, the hair rose. I didn't stop. I didn't turn around. I drove straight to my apartment and locked the door. My phone buzzed at 3:12 a.m. A notification from the hallway camera I'd never uninstalled. Motion detected. I stared at the screen without opening it. Then the message preview appeared under the alert, like the camera had picked up audio. One line of text transcribed. Don't forget the rules. And beneath it, softer, like a woman humming in the walls. We're still here.